The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Madam Speaker, as the Member of Parliament for the Ontario riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke, I begin my comments by recognizing Canadians struggling with high food, fuel and tax bills from a broken federal government. During question period in this House, I made a direct request to the Prime Minister and his Socialist coalition. Give Canadians a tax break. Cancel the carbon taxes. The carbon tax is not an environmental policy, regardless of what the NDP Liberals coalition falsely claims. The carbon tax is a tax policy. As a tax policy, the carbon tax is making life unaffordable for Canadians. While the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance is not prepared to be honest with Canadians about the fact that a carbon tax is making life unaffordable for average Canadians, moments later during the same question period came this astonishing admission of failure from the Minister of Agriculture. She said, and I quoted from the March 30th Hansard, "Canada's official food policy is designed to support the creation of more food banks." End of quote. She even bragged this was Canada's first official food policy. Food banks are policy failure. It's an admission of failure. The need for food banks, thanks to rising Liberal carbon taxes, is not something to be proud of. No Canadian in a country as rich and blessed in natural resources as we are should have to rely on food banks to meet their daily nutritional requirements. Food insecurity in Canada is a direct result of carbon tax policy, a bad tax policy that's intended to change the behavior of residents who have no alternative when it comes to how they heat their homes or how they get to work. The Parliamentary Budget Officer shows the carbon tax will cost the average family between $400 and $847 in 2023, even after the rebates. But to justify the carbon tax, the Prime Minister falsely claims that carbon tax opponents don't care about the environment. This is a bit rich coming from someone who bills working Canadians $6,000 a night to stay in fancy European hotels. So just how out of touch is this Prime Minister with the struggles of ordinary Canadians? Canadian taxpayers paid $160,000 just for security and staff for his most recent Caribbean vacation with billionaire family friend Peter Green. Green's also made a large donation to the now discredited Pierre Elliott Trudeau Family Foundation that's mixed up in the Communist China election interference scandal. $160,000 is cheap compared to the $247,000 taxpayers were forced to shell out for an earlier Caribbean vacation at the Aga Khan's private island in the Bahamas. This Prime Minister is out of touch with just how destructive his policies are to average Canadians. When the Liberal Party in general, and the Prime Minister in particular, talks about the environment or man-made global warming, the Prime Minister uses a propaganda technique called paltering. Paltering is the use of truthful facts to deceive. It might not feel like lying, but it is. An example of paltering is, well, we know climate is changing, that's a fact. That is then followed up with some form of deception, like climate alarmism. Climate alarmism, which is used by some climate extremists to justify carbon tax policy, omits the fact that climate science is still developing. Climate models are being made to say what they do not say, truth and deception. Using climate alarmism to deceive is the default excuse to every government failure, including the need for food banks as a substitute for real food security for Canadians. This is all being done to justify higher and higher carbon taxes, and paltering is being used by this government to try and sell rightfully skeptical Canadians, not only on the policy for carbon taxes, but a need for carbon taxes to keep increasing at a higher and higher rate.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Madam Speaker, the member can be as critical as she likes, and she has been very critical in regards to the price on pollution, as many countries around the world have incorporated that as a policy in order to protect the environment. Here in Canada, Madam Speaker, what you will find is that 80% of the people that are paying into the price on pollution, as we all do, Madam Speaker, are receiving more money than we actually pay in. That is something that was highlighted by the budget officer. So when the Conservatives say that they're going to get rid of the price on pollution, what they don't tell you is they're also going to be getting rid of the rebate portion of the price on pollution, which in Winnipeg North riding in particular, the riding I represent, 80% of my constituents get a net gain from the price on pollution. So they're literally taking money out of the pockets. And then now the Conservatives will say, well, but if you take a look at this factor, this factor, this factor, this factor, and that factor, well, then there's a net cost. But if then I would argue, well, then if you take a look at the costs of no actions and the impact that the environment is going to have on Canadians, there's going to be all this factor, that factor, and this factor, and that's going to increase the cost. The bottom line is, Madam Speaker, X number of dollars are going into the collection of the price on pollution, and X number of dollars are going out. 80% of my constituents are receiving more dollars coming in than they are paying out. And that is what the parliamentary budget officer says. In regards to the ongoing character assassination of political figures inside the chamber, it's interesting when she makes reference to the Prime Minister when he goes overseas. I was around when the Prime Minister Harper is in India, and he pays $1 million to fly a car over to India, Madam Speaker, so he'd have a car to drive around in. Like, they have cars and vehicles in India, but he wanted his car from Canada. Imagine paying $1 million for that. Or if you want to talk about the current leader spends thousands and thousands of dollars on his monthly water bills in a government-sponsored or government-paid house when it's not that far from his own house, Madam Speaker, not to mention the thousands of dollars for cooking, the $100,000 plus in order to keep the premises clean. If you want to throw rocks, I would suggest that the member not throw them in a glass house, because what you'll often find is that even in her past leadership and her current leadership of the Conservative Party, there's been a number of things in which the public would be somewhat concerned about. And I can assure the member that what we, as the Conservatives, want to focus attention on being critical and character assassination, what they will find is that the government of Canada, in particular the Prime Minister, will continue to focus our attention on Canadians and the needs of Canadians, those issues that are important. And that's why, Madam Speaker, you will see within this budget, you will see things like the grocery rebate, you will see things like the dental support program, you will see even things, Madam Speaker, that haven't even been talked about that much. Things such as providing the doubling of the credit for tradespeople that need to buy the type of equipment that they need, the tools that they need, from $500 to $1,000. So many good things that are out there, and Canadians should be aware that as much as the Conservatives will continue to be critical from a personal point of view, we will continue to deliver for Canadians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Madam Speaker, paltering is used to deflect from food bank usage by promoting a grocery rebate that doesn't even begin to cover inflationary policy that's raising the cost of food, and rebates on the carbon tax that do not cover the cost of the carbon tax. Not content to tax Canadians $40 a tonne, the carbon tax went up to $65 a tonne with the latest April Fool's Day increase. The real cost of rising carbon taxes is the need for more food banks, according to the Liberal Minister of Food Insecurity. Conservatives believe we should protect our environment with technology, not taxes. We don't believe in punishing working people for heating their homes and driving to work. Food banks should not be government food policy. It's time this out-of-touch Prime Minister and his costly coalition admit that carbon taxes are hurting Canadians.
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Well, Madam Speaker, the member makes reference to the grocery rebate at the very beginning of her comments in that 1 minute. And it's interesting, I don't know exactly where the Conservative Party is on it. We had Bill 46 in which it passed the House, from what I understand, unanimously, implying that the Conservative Party actually supports the grocery rebate, yet you get some members that will be